What if, when you weren't feeling well, someone could scan you and not only tell you what's wrong, but also send energetic healing to help you?
I would love that.
That would be amazing, right?
Yes.
And what if this person could even tell you how close to dying you were?
I don't know if I would like that.
Well, that's literally just scratching the surface with our next guest. She can communicate with spirits, both alive and dead.
Dead spirits?
Curious choice of words. We're going to ask her about that. She can scan animals. She can access people's past lives. And she can even remove ghosts from homes and other buildings.
This is someone who needs to be our friend.
And still only literally scratching the surface. This one is going to be amazing. So here we go. My name is Will.
And I'm Karen.
And unlike Mulder and Scully,
we both want to believe.
So we've embarked on a journey of discovery.
We've talked to people deeply entrenched in the spiritual and metaphysical world.
We've thrown ourselves into weird and wonderful experiences. I even joined a coven of witches.
And wait, you joined a coven?
Yep, all in the interest of finding something.
Anything.
That will prove that there's something beyond this physical,
three-dimensional world we all live in.
This is the Skeptic Metaphysicians. Welcome to the Skeptic Metaphysicians. I'm Will.
And I'm Karen.
And she is the author of the book, Angelic Attendants, What Really Happens as We Transition from This Life into the Next. She's also written a series of children's books that have angels answering kids' tough questions. And she's the host of the Ask Julie podcast, which is heard by millions in over 100 countries across the globe, where she scans and helps callers with different ailments. I couldn't be more thrilled to welcome to the show Julie Ryan. Julie, thank you for being on the Skeptic Metaphysicians today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So we said a lot in the introduction about what you do and who you are and what your show is about, but can you give us a nugget of who Julie Ryan is?
Certainly. I'm a businesswoman, entrepreneur. I founded 9 companies in 5 industries over 30 years, and I'm an inventor of surgical devices sold throughout the world. So I'm a businesswoman who learned how to do woo-woo, and I'm a buffet of psychicness.
A buffet of psychicness.
A buffet of psychicness.
All you
So
can eat.
some of the things that you talked about are just, like you said, they are just a sampling of my buffet. And once we connect with spirit, we can go take it anywhere we want. It's really fun.
And I went down this massive rabbit hole when I was looking into you, getting ready for our interview. I was hard pressed to find how am I going to introduce this person on the show. She does so much that I had to pick something, and I picked the medical scanning because that just seems so interesting to me. So let's dive into that a little bit. People on your show, people call you and they say, "Hey, Julie," because I know that you don't do it unless you get someone's permission, right? You don't scan someone without their permission, which is incredibly ethical of you. Thank you. So we should put that out there. But someone then asks you, "Julie, go ahead and scan me," and then you just scan them and say, "Your left earlobe needs a tune-up"?
Yes, similar. I work with clients individually all day long. And then I do my show, as you mentioned, and I raise my vibrational level to the level of spirit. Now, remember, I learned how to do this stuff. I am not a psychic who's had dead people chasing her since childhood. Or if I did, I wouldn't have known what to do with that information.
Wow.
So I learned how to do all of this. And so I connect with them energetically, turn my abilities on and off at will. Don't walk around scanning people because I don't think that's any of my business. It's unethical, and I don't really want to know. Imagine being in a crowd of people and that one's got strep throat, that one's got hip problem, that one's got whatever. No, thank you.
I can't imagine you being sane for very long in that case.
Oh,
But at least you'd know who to stay away from.
Yeah, good point. That one's got
True.
COVID. That one's got
True. Yeah. They look like pig pen. They've just got this cloud of dust around them. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So I raise my vibrational level. I connect in with them anywhere. If you guys were on Mars, I could scan you on Mars. It doesn't matter. And I'm like a human MRI. And something will be identified. And I actually see body parts. Will and Karen, I can see broken bones, torn ligaments, viral infections, bacterial infections, cancer, COVID, whatever.
Wow.
And then I facilitate energetic healings. And those can take the form of something getting added, something getting removed. I watch procedures all the time in my mind's eye that emulate what I saw in the operating room for 30 years when I was in and out of there developing products, testing prototypes, things like that. Sometimes I see healings that utilize methodologies and devices that haven't been invented yet. And regardless of what I'm seeing, I'm very descriptive with the person with whom I'm working, because if they can envision it, it helps integrate the healing into their body, simply because when our brains show us something, the body's going to react. Think about watching a scary movie. Your brain knew it was pretend, but your heart might have felt like it was getting ready to jump out of your chest. So that's an overview of what I do.
And you say you learned all of this? Like
I did.
What made you decide you wanted to learn? And did you go to school? How
Right.
does that work?
That's my question. How did
I
you learn
wanna
how to do
learn
this?
this.
Yeah. Not only did I learn it, I teach people all over the world how to do this. A lot of people who've gone through my training are physicians, judges, Hollywood producers and directors, housewives, plumbers, whatever. All walks of life, bunch of professors. I think I've had 17 professors go through from different specialties. And then they utilize these skills, not just the medical, but all of them, again, just connecting into spirit. And they utilize it to enhance their lives and the lives of those close to them, people that they love. So I studied a curriculum of 6 years. Karen, what led me to do this was I read a book called Anatomy of the Spirit by a woman named Carolyn Mace, and she called herself a medical intuitive. This was a little over 30 years ago. And I thought, what the heck is that? I'd been in the medical business for some time at that point, and I thought, what's that? I was always trying to come up with ways to help people heal, normally in the form of a surgical device. And so I was interested, and I read her book. I wanted to know more. And back then we didn't have the internet yet. So I did the old fashioned thing and I went to a Barnes and Noble bookstore to see what they had. And I found this book called Hands of Light by Dr. Barbara Brennan. Both these authors are PhDs. Well, Barbara Brennan was a NASA physicist. And she parlayed very complex quantum physics principles into understandable English for the non-scientific mind. That would be me. And talked about how to use healing energies in the form of different modalities to help facilitate healing. And again, I wanted to know more. So I called her school and I said, is there anybody in my area teaching this stuff? And sure enough, there was. And then I studied with that woman for 6 years, who was a graduate of Barbara Brennan's school. And she's still in my life. She's still my mentor 30 years later. And she's in her 80s now. And I laugh. I say, I zap on people all over the world. She's the only one that zaps on me. So that's how it happened. Fast forward, my training now is 4 weeks, 4 Saturdays, 3 hours each Saturday via Zoom. And people say, well, how can you teach all this stuff in such a short period? What it took me, I could have paid for an MD or a PhD with the money I paid to learn this stuff back then. And I say, well, it's kind of like how we communicate. We used to have the carrier pigeon and then the horseback rider and then the Wells Fargo wagon and then the mail. And now we communicate via text and email and phone and all of that. So we are getting more and more sophisticated with how we can present this information. And it's a blast. It is so much fun.
Yeah. It seems to be a lot of fun, but you are my type of people. You come from a scientific background. You're a businesswoman, but yet you found this niche that is very firmly ensconced in the woo. So it's not an intuitive thing where someone like you would then flip and go, oh, I'm going to scan you and I'm going to facilitate some energy healings from you. What kind of reaction did you get when you came out of the closet, so to speak, and say, hey, I'm no longer selling surgical devices. I'm now actually helping you to heal myself?
Well, it was scary for me. It frankly took golden ovary courage for me to put myself out there because, guys have breast balls, girls have golden ovaries. And I thought, oh my gosh, I live in the deep South. I'm going to have men on horseback wearing white hoods, burning a cross in my front yard. I literally thought, whatever. And I have a funny story about that, if I may share
Of
a
course.
fun
Yeah.
story. I was with my mentor and she was doing a healing on me. And I lay on a massage table face up, have a blankie on, I'm all cozy. And then my deceased loved one's spirits are on either side of the table. I can see my deceased grandparents and my parents and my late sister, even my late dog. That spirit's there too.
Was this before or after you learned how to do all this stuff?
This was after I learned how to do this stuff. And one day I was at my mentor's and this Pope spirit showed up, this dead Pope in his whole Pope outfit, the hat, the shepherd's rod, the whole 9 yards. Yeah. And I said, well, who are you? And he said, I'm Clement. And Susan could see him too. And I said, Clement, I never heard of a Pope Clement. And he said, well, yeah, I was number 6. I said, of course, I'm paraphrasing. I said, okay, may I help you? Kind of like, why are you here? And he said, well, you're supposed to teach the world what happens when somebody dies. And I said, I'm not doing that. I'm a businesswoman. People are going to think I'm nuts. He said, yeah. Everything you've done in business has prepared you for this. So just get on with it. He treats me like a Nike ad now. He's just always says, hey, just do it. Just do it. So I said, okay, fine. Kind of blew him off a little bit. And then I got in my car to go home, you guys. And just for kicks, I Googled Pope Clement VI. Well, come to find out, he was in office during the Black Plague when 2/3 of Europe died, and he's best known for his prayers for the dying and his prayers for the dead. And I thought, okay, I can't make that up. I never heard of a Pope Clement, let alone number 6. So fast forward a couple of years, and when he showed up, I had gone through my mother's last day with her dying process, and had gone through it with several other people with whom I've worked telepathically all over the world. And there are stages that everybody goes through from the spiritual side. And so, of course, Clement knew that. And that's what my book, Angelic Attendants, is about. So he prodded me really for several years. And then the final straw was I was in church sitting next to my husband and my son on either side. And from the pulpit, my pastor said, wouldn't it be nice if somebody could really verify that our deceased loved ones and angels, lead us to heaven when we die? And so I'm getting elbowed from both sides, from my men. And I just said, okay, God, really? From the pulpit? Really? And so that's when I took the leap and haven't looked back. And in the meantime, I had sold my surgical device manufacturing company, and I had other companies that were going, but they didn't take that much time. They kind of had great people running them. And so I thought, what the heck? And here I am.
What kind of ailment can you see? I mean, can you see, you mentioned broken bones and things like that, but can you go as far as to see if someone has cancer or terminal illnesses, things like that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And I see stem cell energy get used that generates new organs that oftentimes will show up on subsequent scans. It freaks out the doctors. It's hilarious when that happens. Sometimes I'll have them call me and say, what are you doing? And how does this work? I have a client recently who grew a new spleen 30 years after she had hers removed.
What?
As a teenager. Yeah. And we use stem cell energy to do that. And the doctor kept saying, it's impossible. You can't grow a new spleen. There's no way. And she's like, well, you're looking at and so it's really fun when that happens. But the things that I get to see, and again, in my mind's eye, it's like my head's a big satellite, like a big screen TV. Mm-hmm. And I watch these healings. And as I mentioned, I always am very descriptive. If you listen to one of my shows, my analogies are hilarious at times. I may tell you your elbow looks like a bowl of whipped cream or something crazy, but it's spirit giving me visual analogies and also information into my head. I call them divine downloads. And I'm telling the person with whom I'm working what I'm seeing because they're envisioning it. That helps integrate the healing into their body because we're giving them a human frame of reference for something that we don't know. We don't know about energy healing. Nobody's actually seen it. And at least to this point, I mean, if I was in a physics lab, somebody would be able to monitor what the vibration was of the energy I was utilizing. But that's what makes it so fun. I say stem cell energy is a light amber colored gel with sparkles in it, because you got to have sparkles. It's woo woo. And it has a watery consistency to it. It reminds me of Dippity Do hair gel that they had when I was a kid. Do you remember, Dippity
that
Do?
stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So it's hilarious. And the other thing that's really interesting is spirit will give me analogies that will oftentimes be really readily understandable by the person with whom I'm working. For instance, earlier in the week, I was working with a professional chef. And so I was getting these chef analogies. I am no chef, but I was talking about different chef things, and this client got them instantly. So it was really fun.
When you have a client and they come to you, do they tell you about something specific, or is it just like a checkup and they want to scan and then you find stuff, or both? How does that work?
It's both, really. When I get somebody on my radar, I call it getting them on my radar. I connect with them energetically. The energy is always going to go where it's most needed first, even if they have something happening that's asymptomatic. So if something's identified, immediately thereafter, there's an energetic healing that begins. And then I describe that. And then normally, just from a logistical and from a time standpoint, I'll say, all right, tell me about what your symptoms are. And then I want to hit all of those areas too. But I always go in what I call blind first, because oftentimes we're heading off a problem at the past before it really gets out of hand. And then most of the time, people will want to do lots of things from my buffet of psychicness. So we'll do a medical scan, and then we'll talk to a deceased loved one, and then we'll scan Fluffy the cat, and then we'll do a past life thing, and whatever we can cram into an hour, we do on a private consult. When people call into my show, I limit it to one question so I can get as many people on as I can.
Any worry of some sort of liabilities or anything like that? Have you ever had someone go, that was irresponsible? You said I had cancer and I don't, something like that? Or has it always been, and I don't know what your track record must be, but I'm assuming it's really good. And that's my first question. I'll follow up my second after you finish, because I don't want Karen to beat me to the punch, because she's always got the good questions.
Okay, great question. I'm a businesswoman, so of course there's disclaimers on everything. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Please consult your doctor. This is not considered to be medical advice, that kind of thing. And it's on my site too, my website. And if you're scheduling an appointment with me, you agree to my terms and conditions, which is the disclaimer for the liability issues. Fortunately, I haven't had that in 5 or 6 years since I've been doing this work. Most of the time, if somebody's coming to me with a medical issue, they've been to multiple doctors and they've had multiple diagnoses and perhaps multiple treatment plans, and they still have the same symptoms. So they're not getting the answers that they really want. And a lot of the time, they're desperate, because they're saying, I've been suffering with this for a long time. And oh my gosh, if you can figure out what this is, that would be great. Right. The other thing is, future events are always fluid. And I always say this, things that have happened in the past are set in stone. Things that are happening right now are set. Things that are happening in the future are fluid. So like the sports networks, I do instant replays all the time. I can go back and see what happened in a past time, but I'll say, this is what I'm getting right now. It may be different in an hour, in a day, in a week, in a month. And if you ever talk to a psychic that says they have a 100% success rate, forget it. Run the other way, because nobody does, because it's all based on free will and a bazillion variables and global pandemics and, force majeure and acts of nature and all the above.
Well, you must be a very well-kept secret, because I can only imagine that if it got out, word got out about what you do and how well you do it, you might end up on some table somewhere being experimented on, finding out how to replicate you, because this kind of thing, like to your point, people go to school for many, many years and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then on top of that, have internships. Vast amounts of time of someone's life is spent in this pursuit of medicine. And I have listened to your show, and I want to talk about that in a second. And I've heard some of the things that you talk to with people, and you give at the very least this incredible amount of wonderful hope for people that really helps. And let's face it, mindset goes a long way towards health and healing. It's amazing what you do, but I would probably maybe not be shouting it from the rooftops like you are a little bit, because I'd be afraid I might be end up on a dissection table somewhere. Area 51 is right with people like that.
Nah. But I train people how to do all of this stuff, and anybody can learn it. We all come in with the ability. It's just a matter of developing and then enhancing it. And I think you bring up a really important point, Will, and that is nobody heals anybody else. We all heal ourselves. There's no doctor, no medical provider, no healer, no shaman, no anybody that heals anybody else. And an analogy for that I like to use is, think of when somebody has surgery. At the end of the procedure, the surgeon's going to close the incision with sutures and staples. The surgeon doesn't make the patient's skin grow back. The patient makes their own skin grow back. And it's the same with this. This healing modality that I use and that I teach, I believe, is complementary to Western and Eastern medicine as we know it. So I'll always follow up a client call with a whole bunch of resources. Okay, here's where you can go to get this. Here's a way that you can do a gut biome test. Here's a mold remediation protocol that you may want to do. Here's how to get bioidentical hormones. Here's some articles for you. Here's some podcasts for you. And so I believe what I do complements other forms of healing and really presents perhaps a missing part of the equation that helps people heal.
Well, so then I want to turn our attention to your show, because we touched on it a little bit and I'm fascinated by it. Your show is incredibly popular. You're in 100 different countries in the world. Millions of people listen to you all the time, and you help a ton of people. And before we started recording, you mentioned that you do them in, 12-minute segments with some commercials in between, and you end up on the air for about 2 hours every time you go. So what's how can I say this diplomatically? You must run into all kinds of interesting stories. I'm curious. Does everything that you record go out on the air, or do you have a lot on the cutting room floor?
No, everything I've never had anybody that I've had to cut off in 5 years.
Wow.
And it's funny because people will tell me often that they just listen to the show and it makes them feel better. People will say, well, I've just got it on in the background, and it's just the vibe of the show because it's so much fun. And my energy frequency is so ramped up because I'm bebopping around the globe, scanning people when they call in. You know, I may scan somebody from Portugal, and then I'm going to Kansas, and then I'm going to Montreal, and then I'm going to Tampa, Virginia, right, to you guys. And so they say it's really fun. The other thing that I hear a lot is that it resonates with people because oftentimes a caller will have a question that will emulate whatever my listener has going on in their life. And they'll say, oh my gosh, I wasn't able to call in. I was driving home. The kids were in the car, but I was listening to it. Most people listen to it on playback. They're listening to it on demand. Mm-hmm. And they'll say, I was listening to it, but this caller had the exact question that had I been able to call in this week, I would have asked.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of the Wayne Dyer's radio show back in the day, where to this day, I still listen to the podcast they put together of his radio show. They take little segments and they get call-ins all the time. Now, this was recorded quite a few years ago. Dr. Dyer, rest in peace, is no longer with us, but inevitably, I always get something from that little half-hour segment that they put out there from a caller or two that have nothing to do with what I'm going through, but yet the way he talks to them really puts it in perspective so that things do resonate with us, even if we're not specifically suffering from that particular ailments, for lack of a better word, that they're calling in about.
Well, and every time we listen to something, our vibration level's higher because our spirit continues to expand throughout our lifetimes with every experience that we go through. And so you can listen to one of Wayne Dyer's shows from 10 years ago and you listen to it 5 times. And each time you listen to it, you pick up something different. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Now, when someone calls in, how quickly can you zap them? Like how quick is a scan?
Nanosecond. It takes a second to connect with them wherever they are. I ask them where they're located because it's fun to see where people are calling in from. And then I literally close my eyes. I watch a laser beam come from my body. I'm in Birmingham, Alabama, and I'll watch a laser beam go across a map, either crosses an ocean or it's going, if I'm heading to Nashville, I'm heading up Interstate 65, or I'm heading out Interstate 20 to Dallas or whatever. And I watch this laser beam go and then it hooks into the person. And if they ask me to scan somebody else, for instance, if you said, hey, can you scan my daughter? I would hook into you first, Karen. And then from you, I would hook into your daughter. Do you remember the game Tiddlywinks?
Yeah.
Are you either of you old enough? It's like a spoken... It's like a wheel and spoke kind of a thing. That's what it reminds me of. So I'll hook into you and then I'll watch my laser beam go whatever the direction is to hook into the person that you want me to scan. And then I'll always ask their permission telepathically. And a lot of the time, it's usually with kids, I'll get a no.
Really?
And yeah, it's normally kids will say no. And so I don't scan anybody unless I have their permission. You alluded to that earlier, Will. But not all is lost because we can still talk to their spirit. We can still communicate telepathically with their spirit. And the reason that I don't have a problem with that is, let's say, Karen, you had pneumonia. You're going to tell me what you want me to know, but I'm not looking at your chest x-ray without your permission. So that's how I rationalize that. And we get a lot of information from spirits. It's really fun when we talk to animal spirits, especially if they've got some malady going on or my dog's not eating. Usually they want little friskies. They want the cheapest dog food that you can get in the store. And the owner's buying, some expensive something. And I say, I just want little friskies. And the owner will say, oh my gosh, I'm not going to do that. I'll say, just try it. And then I'll get an email and they'll say, oh my God, Fluffy just loves the little friskies. Thank you for the information.
Now, I wanted to ask you this question towards the end of the interview so that I can edit it out if it's something that you prefer not to do. But would you be willing to scan one of us, or you prefer to leave that?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. Well, it's up to you if you want me to scan you, because if it's something that you don't want publicized.
Well, if we don't want something publicized, we can always
edit that out. Yeah.
Magic of editing.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Is there something, just for time's sake, that you have that's a symptom of something that you want me to focus on?
There's something going on in my body that I found out about 8 months ago or so, and I'm going in for periodic testings to see how it's going, make sure it's not getting any worse. So far, things are going steady, but it's obviously at some point I'm going to have to make a decision as to whether I'm just going to leave it be or if I'm going to do something about it.
The energy first went to your low back left side, like you got some pain. Low back left side, you got some inflammation going on there. Are you having discomfort?
It's a permanent discomfort in my lower back. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It's always been an
so
issue.
You've got some vertebral collapse. You've got a bulging disc. It's pressing on your sciatica. My guess is you probably have sciatica pain every now and again on the left side. So what I'm doing is I'm propping up those vertebrae. Imagine if your back looks like a rack of baby back ribs. And here's one of my fun analogies, right?
And they do, because I eat a lot of them.
There you go. And so the vertebrae are represented by the ribs and the disc is represented by the meat. Well, if the meat is being pushed out, those ribs are going to start collapsing. And that's what I'm seeing on the left side, lower back. And so what I'm doing is propping them up, spirit working through me and with me, propping them up. And the devices that I use to prop them up remind me of the spacers that a tile mason will use when they're laying tile before they pour the grout.
Mm-hmm.
Doing that, the disc is pushed back in. Discs are blue. They look to me like a bag of gel. They remind me of a breast implant before it's implanted. Can you tell I spent a lot of time in surgery? Yeah.
Yeah, a little
And,
bit.
it's just like a plastic bag with gel in it. But it's blue. And so that gets pushed back in. And then there's this very delicate netting that gets stretched from the upper vertebra to the lower vertebra. And it reminds me of the netting that you'd see somebody use to get a goldfish out of a bowl or out of a aquarium. And it's really funny because I can go back and scan somebody years after I watched that healing happen, and that netting will be there. And I'll say, did I do a healing on your back? I'm seeing my netting. And they'll say, yeah, you did several years ago. I was like, cool. So that's what's happening there with your low back. That'll get the inflammation down. That'll help you heal better. You got a little bit of scoliosis in your back. You got a little bit of curvature. So this is another healing. So see, something was identified. There's a healing. This is a second thing that's being identified. Imagine there are two rods being placed on either side of your spine. You got a little bit of curvature going to the right side. So the rod on the left is stationary. Your spine's been heated with an energetic laser to make it pliable, similar to a potter's clay. It needs to be pliable for them to make a vase or a bowl or whatever they're creating. So imagine your spine is pliable. The rod on the right is moving very slowly towards the left. It's just gone into a groove that reminds me of a sliding glass door. And that has your spine straightened in place. Now your spine's being lasered again to fire it again, like a potter would fire their creation to make it solid. And so that'll help your back feel better.
Wow.
And then we can work on your sciatica. Do you want me to do your sciatica? Do we have time?
We'll always have time.
Okay.
For healing.
All right. So sciatica, imagine that nerve looks like a piece of aquarium tubing. And it gets debris, and it gets, when nerves are injured, they get dead cells. They're called necrotic cells. They'll get dead cells and other debris in them. So imagine that tube is being roto-rooted. Imagine there's a corkscrew, a little tiny corkscrew that's spinning inside of it. It's morcellating all of the debris that's in there. And then it gets irrigated. And that's my favorite part of this healing because it makes your foot look like a sprinkler. Imagine water flying out of the end of your toes. That's what it looks like. Someday I'm going to invent a sprinkler that's a foot just because I see it all the time. And then I'm pouring stem cell energy in there to regenerate it. Again, stem cell energy is a light amber colored gel, has sparkles in it because woo-woo, and it reminds me of Dippity Do hair gel. And then there's a vortex that's spinning behind your left thigh, and that is what transforms the stem cell energy wheel into new body parts, whatever we need. And so that nerve is going from a dark brown or a black even in places, and it's turning pink as I'm watching it in my mind's eye. Interesting sidebar on this. I believe I'm watching in warp speed what our bodies do every day, all day long. Because if you go back to your grade school science lessons, we all learn that every cell has a nucleus. Every nucleus is surrounded by cytoplasm. Cytoplasm's a watery gel like Dippity Do. And our bodies have a centrifugal force that spins that causes the cells to divide and replicate to the tune of billions of them a day. So I believe what I'm watching in warp speed is it's just helping heal your body better, quicker, more completely. So there's a little snippet of what we do. What I do.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your books because I want to make sure we don't run out of time before we do this. You've written a book for grown-ups, let's say, but then you also have a series of, three children's books as well. Tell me a little bit about them. Why kids' books, and what are they about specifically?
Well, I'm kind of like Wheel of Fortune Vanna. I have show and tell. This is Angel Messages for Dogs. angel messages for cats, and angel messages for kids. And they're darling, they're picture books that has angels telling kids different stories of things, like, where the cats like to hide in the washing machine and when the door is open and things like that. Why I wrote them was because I had so many moms over the years ask me to do so, because their child would say that they were seeing a deceased loved one's spirit in their room, and they could talk to him, and they knew information about this, say, deceased granddad. And this child never knew the granddad. The granddad had been dead for 20 years. And this 3-year-old's got all this information about granddad that's accurate. So the mom would say, well, how do I explain that? And then I'd have moms say, how do I explain to my child that they know information about a past life? And it's very detailed, and we can corroborate it with historical information, but this kid can't read yet. What's up with that? And then the last one that I hear a lot is, how do I explain to my small child that grandma's in heaven and we're at the funeral home for the visitation hours, and my little Susie says, no, she's not. She's asleep in that box up there in the front of the room. How do we explain all that to them? So that's how these books came about. And it's mostly fun things, like cats like to climb trees. They like to jump on tables, whatever. But cats, before they're born, they have a spirit and they have a body just like you. And then they choose the family that's going to love and take care of them. And then in the book, if your cat dies, you can still communicate with them, because everybody comes in with these intuitive telepathic abilities. We all are born with them, but children start shutting them down about the age of 7, because they've had the grown-ups in their life, their parents, their grandparents, perhaps teachers, say, oh, honey, that's just your imagination. That's not real. And if we can validate that what the information is that these kids are getting is not only real, but we believe them, then the child can utilize their skills to help enhance their life in just countless ways as they grow into adulthood. So it's been really fun watching those take off and watching how well they've been received.
Wonderful. I don't think we've ever had, Karen, anyone on the show that actually spoke specifically to kids about things like this. And you and I have had the conversation, like, how do we talk to our daughter?
It's so necessary. And to do it in a way that's so gentle, I think, is just fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, fun story too, real quickly. I was led to do this with all the moms, and then there were a series of events that everything just lined up, boom, 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 within about 48 hours, including somebody coming into my life who has been in the child TV industry on PBS for over 20 years. And I said, well, I'm being led to write a children's book. And she said, great, send me the manuscript and I'll help you, tweak it. So she'd tweak a word so that a 3-year-old really could understand it in a way that would make sense. And so what I find is that not only with this, but in everything that I've done, the people I need to show up exactly when I need them. And this is just another example of that. My illustrator's in Ireland. She was a fashion designer and had kids and wanted to stay home. And so she became a children's book illustrator. So it's really been a fun journey. And there are more coming out. The next book is in the works already.
Wonderful.
That's fun. Yeah. And then your grown-up book,
my grown-up book.
It's really about what happens when we transition, right, from this life to the next.
It is.
Can you give us a sneak peek into what happens?
Yes, absolutely. We have pictures in it too. We have illustrations.
Yes, that works for me really well.
Well, I think it does for most people. When we're dying, we go through what I call 12 phases of transition, and it's how we're surrounded by angels and the spirits of deceased loved ones and the spirits of deceased pets. And there's a configuration that changes as the person's getting closer to death. And we all go through 12 phases as I perceive it. And it can be in a nanosecond. if somebody dies very suddenly, like in the case of a homicide or a suicide, or if they die over days, weeks, months, year, we all go through the 12 phases of transition. But it may happen in a nanosecond. It may be prolonged over weeks, days, months, years.
Wow.
And the interesting thing about this is the first time I saw this was when my own mother was dying in 2002. And I had learned a lot of this woo-woo stuff, but this is the first time I'd seen any of this. And I thought, am I having a hot flash? What is this? I know I'm grieving, but what? And then I've seen it just countless times. And it's very comforting. And the book is full of stories of families with whom I've worked where I'm identifying spirits that are in the room. I'm identifying deceased pets. We're coming up with information that there's no way that I could know. I can communicate with the person who's dying, even if they can't communicate to their family members. And there are 3 questions I always ask. Are you ready to go? What do you need? Are you in pain? And the requests are just across the board of what people at the end of their life want. One other interesting point, there's been university-based research that validates and corroborates that we do see deceased loved ones and the spirits of deceased pets as we're ending our lives. And it's about 90% is what the university-based research shows. So the other thing that I believe is people have been able to see this since the beginning of time, because there's a prayer said at the end of every Roman Catholic funeral called In Paradisum, which in Latin means into paradise. The angels and your loved ones will greet you and lead you into paradise. And when I was writing the book, I researched where did that prayer originate and learned that it started as a 5th century Gregorian chant. And I have to believe that maybe it took till the 5th century till somebody was well educated enough that they could read and write. And certainly those were men at that time living in monasteries and synagogues. And as we have become more well-educated, we've dumbed down our intuitive senses. We get a gut feeling for something, but our logic takes over and we wish we would have just followed the gut feeling because we are so proof-based in our world now. So I love it when science catches up with woo-woo, and that's what's happening with the research on death and dying.
It seems like it's moving faster and faster. I actually just read a report the other day that it's been proven that our life does flash before our eyes as we pass as well. So a lot of that research is coming to the surface now, which is really, really great because as everyone who's listened to the show knows, my biggest fear is death itself. So this show's been helping me quite a bit, little by little, to get more comfortable with the fact that we're not just this 3-dimensional body we are living in. So it's making things easier.
Most people are afraid of death because it's been, and this is what Pope Clement has not commanded me. He's challenged me to do. Let me say, your mission, if you choose to accept it, kind of a thing.
This tape will self-destruct in 15 seconds.
Exactly. And he said it's been so bastardized through the ages, and people, when they die, my parish priest says people are afraid they don't know, are they going to fly or are they going to fry? And I thought, what a great way to put it.
Oh, wow. In such a terrible way.
Well, yeah, but people are so afraid because we've been just brainwashed with all of this propaganda that's been used to control the masses. How do you control people? Fear. You better do what I want, or, this horned demon's going to come and throw you into a burning pit for eternity. Really? No. And so that's why Pope Clement said, this is basically your mission, is to teach the world what happens when somebody dies. And that's when I was saying, I'm not doing it. And here I am.
If someone wanted to reach out to you or get a copy of your book, what's the best way for someone to do that?
Everything is at askjulieryan.com. askjulieryan.com. It's really easy. And if somebody wants a copy of my book, all they have to do is go to askjulieryan.com and go to the Ask Julie button and say, hey, I heard you on Will and Karen's show. I'd love a copy of your book, either angelic attendants, or if you have kids or grandkids, one of the kids' books, and we'll send you a free digital download and a free audiobook. So just askjulieryan.com, the Ask Julie button, and we'll be delighted to do that just for your listeners, just as a gift. And I hope you enjoy it. And I hope if you've lost a loved one or you're in the process of losing a loved one, it helps comfort you and give you a lot of information that'll help you get through that journey.
Well, thank you, Julie. That is incredibly generous. And we're going to go ahead and add a direct link on our show notes. So if you're interested in reaching out to Julie and possibly getting a copy of her book, you can always go to skepticmetaphysician.com, go to her episode page, and that direct link will be laid in the show notes right there for you. Makes it super easy. You are absolutely lovely in every way that you can possibly define that word. It has been such a pleasure. You're one of those people that just lightens up the room when you're talking to you. It's almost like I don't want to go. Like,
no, we could talk to you all day. Well, it's nighttime, all night.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about everything. And thank you so much for the scan and the healing. I'm excited about it. So it very, very generous of your time and your energy and your expertise. So we really appreciate it.
Oh, my honor and privilege. Thanks so much for having me.
And thanks to you for coming along on this journey of discovery. Now, we'd love to continue our conversation with you on our website or on Facebook and Instagram under @Skeptic Metaphysician, or of course, skepticmetaphysician.com. And if you're listening to this on the radio and you missed anything, not to worry. All of our shows, including this one, can be found at skepticmetaphysician.com, where you can also watch the videos or even send us email or voicemails directly from the site. We absolutely love feedback and would appreciate hearing from you, whether you love the show or you think we are off our tree. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as we have. That's all for now. We'll see you on the next episode of The Skeptic Metaphysicians. Until then, take care.